Welcome, friends, to an Ash Creator Being original podcast, Spirit Actually, where we share personal stories of the moments in our lives where we cannot deny, dismiss, or refute that Spirit actually is guiding us. This is chicken soup for the new earth soul, my friends. And if you love this episode, please do spread the good. Share it, like it, and if you want more incredible content and trust falling with yourself and a loving universe, please visit ashcreatorbeing.com, where you'll find my masterclasses and a 30-day program to a more magical life and you. Now, let's get spirited. Welcome, friends, to our episode of Spirit Actually, where we share personal stories of the moments in our lives where we cannot deny, dismiss, or refute that Spirit actually was guiding us. And today I have the most special guest, one of my nearest and dearest sister wife friends. Her name is Tracey Rooney. She's just an exceptional being on this planet with one of the most wide open, loving hearts I know. Number two, she's an exceptional mom. Number three, she's an exceptional, incredibly masterful creator. She's an actress and producer, and she also does coaching. And so I just want to welcome my dearest Mr. Mary Tracey,
Oh, wow. Can you go with me to all my auditions and just talk about me first?
Oh my God, I'd love to.
I would just love to spend even more time with you, but this is a magic thing. Ashley is an incredible being, and I'm very privileged to be here and spend some time with you, girl.
Oh my gosh. So Tracey was there. She was like at the OG starting line of my spiritual awakening. She witnessed all the cuckoo from A to Z. She has been literally like my hype girl, ride or die since the beginning of my spiritual process.
Accurate.
Yeah, accurate. Very accurate. Like 13 years now.
What?
13 years. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. So we'll probably get into some like mutually personal stories. I mean, you're here to share your stories and but I'm sure we'll both digress about some shared experiences that we had because we had the same teacher. And I don't think I've ever talked about John on any of my podcasts.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a rabbit hole, y'all, but we'll give you the goods, the most important goods. What else? But Tracey has just had a true, very winding path of getting to experience so many different traditions. I feel like you have a really great kind of dictionary in your cellular understanding and connection to different traditions. And you have just so much compassion that you've learned in many different ways. And so I feel like that's the story I want to hear from you, is kind of how you've woven together your experiences throughout your life.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. No small feat here. You've really experienced so much, and you're so open and you're so curious, and she's so sincere. And I feel like all those qualities has just allowed her to develop herself so deeply and so expansively, which is why you can hold space for so many people in your life. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Sister Tracey.
Ashley.
Let's, I think starting at the beginning is always kind of a fun place to start, like, kind of your influences with spirit. And really the only formal question we ask here, and I ask it at the end, is what would you describe as spirit? How would you describe it? But we'll get to that. So yeah, little Tracey, where did she start?
Tracey.
Yeah, where did she start experiencing spirit?
Little Tracey went to Catholic school and was very devout as a child. But I had a very, very religious mother's side of my family. and my dad was an atheist. So it was really interesting to see that war between them. And at the time, it was like logic versus surrender, devotion, or following what someone told you to do versus like rebellion of that. So I was sort of in the middle observing all of that, which was really interesting to me. And
you've always been so observant, and I believe that you were a deeply aware kid too, completely.
But also stuck in my head.
Yeah,
I've always been Tracey's. Everybody has an Achilles heel, right? But stuck in my head, like the intellectual. And that's when I would say stuff started to not make sense in my faith. And I became really interested in Judaism as a little kid. And you probably remember this. So I went to Jewish
all
camp.
the stories about Jewish camp.
Yeah, I negotiated Jewish camp as long as they would take me to church on Sundays. And so I was like the one shiksa at Jewish camp all summer in Connecticut. And then I would go to church on Sundays. Because there were a couple of counselors who were European, who were just there, you know, and they'd go to church. So I'd join them. And that was fascinating.
Yeah.
And I had this one rabbi say to me that the Bible says it's okay to not know what you believe or not know anything. Your actions are important, and how you behave in the face of not knowing or understanding. Ask all the questions.
Yeah.
Ask all of them. But in the meantime, while you're searching or while you're trying to understand or grow, you behave kindly, you behave with decency, you behave with grace. You keep your heart open rather than like having to know all the answers.
Yes.
And, you know, that was just very different than what the nuns would say of just like, you need to pray for more surrender.
More knowing.
Right. Like you just need
the
trust. And I realized like the trust was because I couldn't make sense of some of the teachings that now I trust that the surrender is more to the divine, is more to the inside than it is for me to any one way of, it's like paths up the mountain, you know, like that path works, but there's all these other paths that maybe you just don't know about. Like, and maybe this other path is better. I don't know. Either way you're going up the mountain, right? I mean, so that was my childhood.
So that that reconciled then for you what you were experiencing in your home. It gave you a coping.
Yeah. It gave me a way that like nobody has to know all the, what's the thing with the elephant, you know, like people are blind, they touch the elephant, they're sure that they know what that is, but one of them is touching the trunk and one of them is touching the legs and one of them is you know, all of it can be true.
Yeah.
All of the practices, all of the ways that someone is so sure of, that somebody has had direct experience, can be absolutely true. And also, there's this other thing that's also true. And that's the thing I think started to make a lot of sense to me by the time I was like 13.
Wow. That's a big thing. That's that's non-duality. That's two truths coexisting with each other, and they can both be right. It doesn't have to be right and wrong and separatist.
Right. And my mother, who's very like, no, you follow the rules. This is how it works. This is what you do. I realized maybe that's what she needs. But that's not the way for me to grow. But I absolutely respect that she needs like very strict parameters, rules, things to follow. And it gives her a lot of comfort.
Yeah.
And it's funny. We were just talking the other day about this, about how there are all these things that our bodies do, our spirits do, our hearts do, to protect us, to help us through hard times generationally.
Survival conditioning.
Yeah. And then you get to this point and you can say, like, thank you for doing your best to protect me, but like, this isn't helping anymore. You may go.
Yeah.
And I could see like the generational path from my families and how they got me here.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can say, like, I'm good. I'm not afraid. You don't need to
control.
Like, had that with teachers.
Oh, yeah.
We've had that with life partners. And then you realize, like, oh, I can shed. It's like shedding a snake skin, you know?
Yeah.
You're done. You don't need that anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, and isn't that what expansion is? You're like, oh, like that version of myself that operated that way, that knew that thing, that trusted that, identified with that, however you look at it. Like, yeah, it all served a purpose. None of it was right or wrong. It just keeps leading you to greater expansion and
Right.
Yeah.
And the mother, who we're both fans of, said it's not about consciously even giving it up. You just get to a point where you just don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
It's easy because you're just done with it.
Yeah, I call it moving through humanness. That's the language I use a lot now. Like, I've moved through it.
That's
perfect.
Can
choose, use, move, and then lose. Like, and it's all great.
Yeah.
And I can put it all on my shelf, and if I need to pull it back out again, I can. Like, but I don't have to
going anywhere. But I'm
not going anywhere. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So 13-year-old Tracey like knew that absolute deep truth.
My Catholic schoolgirl uniform. I do my Jewish prayers. No. I just always thought I would marry a Jewish boy, and then that would make sense to convert. But I knew there was something that wasn't quite that either. Mm-hmm. And then I think I still sort of kept circling back to the Catholic Church. There was something that felt more comforting than the rest of Christianity to me. Maybe it's because I grew up there. The tradition, my mother-in-law calls it smells and bells, you know, but I met our teacher several years before you, and I really was interested for a lot of years in Hinduism and Buddhism, but never as like a way that I wanted to follow.
Interesting.
Never. It never felt like my way. It just felt like a way to understand missing pieces.
Yeah, and I felt similarly, like everything that we learn with John, and I call John like a cosmic Google of
what it is.
Of spiritual traditions, because he spent his entire life trying to understand and connect, and not just on a mental level, but on a level of consciousness, these different traditions. And that was like what you felt when you were around him, and he knew so much, and he knew the common denominators. Like, he could string stuff together and be like, this is the same in this tradition, in this tradition, in this tradition. This is how they're all saying it, but this is what they actually mean. This is the internal teaching.
Yes.
And that was the value of really understanding like the Vedas, and understanding awareness through the lens of Buddhism, and understanding the Divine Mother in all of her traditions. And and I feel like, that's what we ended up exploring so deeply with John and the different practices.
Yeah. And it was so easy to quiet my mind for the first time too. And so I could experience that in awareness and not in a mental way.
Is that when you met John, was that like the first time your mind quieted? Was it that kind of
I'd had experiences before. Usually, just saying it, I feel it in my heart.
Yeah.
I remember times as a kid, like my heart would just open and I would feel so much light and everything was quiet.
Interesting.
And I wasn't stuck on the gerbil wheel of like thinking mind.
Got it.
But I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know why or how to repeat it or how to live in that space. because like Tracey mind wants to take over again, or emotional mind, emotional feelings and thoughts want to rule the roost over here in this body that I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you met John, is it fair to say that like he could give you grounding, repeatable, practicable ways
Yeah.
to experience spirit and experience a quiet mind?
Yeah. I mean, I remember the first time I met him and I really, like for the whole, I don't know, hours and hours it was our class,
Yes.
right? Even the first one. And I just there was no thought. It was
Yeah.
just quiet for hours. And I remember driving home doing hair and awareness as I was driving because I just didn't want to have it stop.
Yeah.
And yeah, that like finding easy ways to just drop my mind at the bank,
Mm.
at work, and then come back and trust that it was there to help me when I needed it, but I didn't have to live in that space. And then when I did practice, there was so much more grace and connection to the divine because I was in awareness.
Yeah. So I want to get into that nitty gritty, that feeling experience, because I feel like it's really important for people to have that mirrored to them and heard about. Is like when you say grace and when you say drop your mind in a quiet mind, like, can you walk us
Yeah.
through, like, what was that for you? What did that feel like?
Well, when I say drop your mind, uh, for me, it's as simple as like, uh, Ash and you and I know a hand awareness exercise.
Right.
Um, or just feeling my feet on the ground, or noticing how my butt feels in this chair,
Right.
and suddenly I click back into awareness, and I can
Yeah.
feel the van on my shoulders, and I notice things that maybe I didn't when my thoughts were leading the way, or I'm in my feelings, and that is in charge. The thoughts and the feelings are still there. They're accessible. They're right. I still have a warm feeling just talking to you, even if I'm feeling my butt in the chair.
Right.
Um, but I'm right here. I'm fully accessible and present, and
Yeah.
in this moment. The way if I'm run by my thoughts or my emotions, I'm not. I'm not fully present. So that's what I mean by dropping my mind or being in awareness.
Perfect. No, that's
And
great.
and the grace is different
Yeah. It's
depending
connected.
on
Yeah.
how you're connected or what's happening. I experienced grace so many times in the Catholic Church as a kid. I experienced it so many times in the huppah at Jewish camp, but it was different. Now I can stay quiet and call on the divine, and Mother is there, or aspects of the divine are there, and different aspects feel different, which helps me also understand duality and non-duality in different religions, how they can all be true,
Yeah.
because it's still just the divine to me, but it's like a strength and a light and a power that to me is very undeniable. It's very like scientific, you can say. I'm experiencing this thing, and I can quantify it even.
Yeah. You can talk about the qualities of it and how it's
Yes.
moving through your body and the density of it, and like, and for me, like when I had my whole awakening, it was like a somatic initiation
Yes.
for me.
I remember with you and just the hours on the couch where you were just feeling
Yeah.
specificity and like what was heavy, what was light,
Yeah.
um what just felt
Peaceful,
peaceful.
radical,
Yes.
full, light,
Yes.
dense, transformative, like it was affecting my mind, or it was affecting this part of my body, or it was, in my feet or past my feet. Like it was just like so
Yeah.
specific.
And you had such a direct, intense uh, experience for
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
that just immediately. I think mine was a little bit slower.
But like you were saying, like the grace that you experienced, say, in the Catholic Church as a kid and in the chuppah, compared to when you were sitting there and you were full awareness and you were connecting intentionally to grace, were two different. So what was it like when you were a kid? What was the quality of that experience?
It's funny. Uh, both of the most intense experiences I can remember. One was in the Catholic Church, and one was when I was really just struggling with emotional puberty life. One I remember I was going up to receive communion, and I remember feeling like a full surrender. And it was like light was coming at me, going into my heart, and I was exploding to the point that I was like, people around me have to know. Like, I don't know if I can keep walking. I don't know what's happening to me. I'm having this
Wow.
crazy, like I'm a flame throwing, I don't know what. Um, like I was being purified, light going into my heart, and then going like this.
Wow. That's pretty
Um,
specific.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, I will never forget it because it
Yeah.
was so. It was just such a concrete feeling
Yeah.
experience. And then I had the same exact experience. My parents were getting divorced. There was a lot of stuff going down. And it's a long story. I knew a lot of dirt that was going on that
Okay.
my mom wasn't aware of, and I was really like not sure what to do. And I went on a hike with myself, and then the same light I felt in my chest. I may have been praying,
Yeah.
but it was the same sort of surrender. And like when we get to places that are at crossroads, like,
Yeah.
we're just like, I don't know. It's like, people, when they talk about like, alcoholics hitting the low or whatever, it's like those moments where just naturally in life, there's a surrender.
Yeah.
I feel like is an opening for the grace to come in. And I
Wow.
remember that same feeling in my heart and the same feeling like I was exploding with light. And I was like,
Wow.
this is that thing I remember. And
Wow. You had the experience in the church, and then you had an experience in nature, and it
yes,
was the same
same
grace.
exact experience.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was undeniable. I had to sit on this hill, just sit down.
Yeah.
It was incredible. And it was like this, for me, it was the undeniable presence of so much that I don't understand, that is guiding me, that is there, that I don't know even what else to say about it.
No, that's great. I mean, it was very concrete, and that was a great explanation. I just wanted to hear that because that was very significant when
Yeah.
you were a child, and then you didn't experience that again really until then you met John, right? Or did you
Yeah,
experience it?
not to that same extent.
Yeah.
I think I searched for it. But I also, life and boyfriends and college and whatever. And oh God, I forgot. I, God, it was around then that I think I went to confession and I talked to a priest and I cried like I should want to become a nun, but I don't.
Wow. How
Like,
old
am
were
I just a jerk because I want to live life? But I should just go live in a cloister or somewhere. Why am I so selfish? And then I
you?
remember, I forgot. And the priest was like, come out and talk to me. Like, so I sat on the pew and he was like, just go kiss a boy. Go have a life. Like, go, what are you talking about? Like, go, what?
How old were you?
I think I was 13. I think it was the same time. I forgot
Interesting.
about that. I had just moved and I didn't know the priest or anything. Thank God. I don't think I ever saw him again. I would have been mortified.
That is actually why I started calling you, because you shared with me that story, and then I started calling you Sister Mary
Oh my God,
Tracy.
I forgot I told
That's
you.
how it all happened.
Yeah, I forgot all about that.
Right. So yeah, you felt just such a tremendous pull to be in this sincere and surrender and in
Yeah.
service to the divine. Wild.
Well, and
Okay.
that's been like a life thing. I mean, even our teacher was so mad at me for getting married and having kids, and
Wow.
um, because it was like, then you can't
A
have,
distraction from the work.
yeah.
Yeah,
But I,
as a
I mean, I remember Ram Dass talking about that at some point. Like, doesn't really get married to this guy. Don't do this thing. Don't. Either way, the work is for you.
right.
Either way, you will find your way through the work. Whatever situation you're in, you will have the opportunity to grow, to work on yourself.
1 million trillion%.
Right. But this
Yeah.
this like I think when I experience the divine, it's not like you must do this path. You must, this is your destiny and you cannot
Do
do
not
this.
waver.
It's
Yeah.
like, oh, there's all these ways.
Yeah.
And what is meant for you will find you. It will not, it's not like you're going to make one wrong move and then you're screwed forever.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's really important for people to hear too, because we're so absolutist when it comes to
Yes.
choosing like our religion or our politics. And it's like, well, then if we change our mind or we go a different way, then like we're so wishy-washy and we don't have a real staff to stand on. And what are our roots and our values? And it's like, my values are expansion. Like,
Yes.
my values are openness and curiosity and feeling that spirit guiding me, like, and I feel like that is so much of what we actually really discovered for ourselves after we kind of left John.
Yes.
And that's like been the second half of our journey together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so you're 13, you didn't become a nun, you kissed boys,
I did.
you went to acting school. You married Peter, who's an amazing human being and a
He
wonderful
is.
father and husband.
Yeah.
Literally one of the only living examples I have in my direct life of a man who's like shows up and is like a kind, wonderful man.
Yeah. I concur.
Yeah, yeah, he's wonderful.
I'm fond of him. I like him. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But then it wasn't far into I mean, you were still dating Peter. You were still very young in your, what, mid-20s? And that's when you met John, and that's like when you got,
I broke up with Peter
right?
and I moved in with Eric, and John started teaching me, and I was at this like crossroads. It was very dramatic.
Yeah.
And Peter and I were just young and afraid, um and we just looked at each other and we're like, we really, really like each other. We just got a little ahead of ourselves. And it was like,
Mhm.
it would be such a shame to walk away from a relationship where we both love and care so much about each other and not try.
Yeah.
So as I was like really seeing, really trying to discern, like, can I build a future with this person? Is this somebody I can be a partner with? I was also starting to study with John, who was like, go live on a mountaintop alone,
Exactly.
never talk to another person again. Cloister yourself. Like that part of me as a little kid who thought I was supposed to become a nun, I really feel like that was
Right.
part of the push from him too. That sort of part of me that needed to reconcile kind of your deepest heart's desire,
Yeah.
and whether that's just an ego trip and you should just do a different thing because somebody told you to, or um, or because you think you should, instead
Yeah.
of really listening inside to what
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
soul needs in this life.
I think you said that so beautifully and articulately, because it's a deep level of discernment when you get to that point where you think like, how much are we in our ego and how much are we in
Yes.
truly the desire that is within our heart that God gave us to follow a certain path and experiencing.
Yes. And I
And
mean,
that,
it's still tricky. It's like,
yep.
you know, I mean, you and I know an exercise where if you find yourself desiring something,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can quiet your mind and imagine your future with that thing, where that thing doesn't happen, break any attachment to any of the things, and then you know what to do. You just
Right.
know. It's not because you're attached to it or because you're because something's repulsive or you're afraid.
Yeah.
It's because it's just the next right thing to do. And
Yeah.
that is huge for me in determining the difference between Tracey ego that wants to do the thing or
Yeah.
really, like, for a long time I stopped acting because I thought it was like silly and childish and I shouldn't do that. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until my kids were old enough that I was like, I really love creating. I miss
Yeah.
it. I it's time to go back to that, but without attachment and
Yep.
with love
Mhm.
for storytelling and the process. And it has been so much fun without
Yeah.
any like worry about if I get that gig or I do that thing. It's just about dancing with the divine.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
we talked about that. That's been a real full circle, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah, a real full circle for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And this, like, that's the thread of our spiritual journey that we have, like, really held each other's hands through, so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's so true. Okay, so I'm kind of going through the timeline now. So this whole time that you had John as a teacher, and I feel like we have to talk about him. I feel like we really have to because there was a massive lesson in discernment that people
Yes.
need to hear about it.
I mean, he was such a big part of our lives, especially you and
Massive.
I. I mean, and it was I was a much worse student than you because I just couldn't. Um, there was just a lot that I didn't trust, but also a lot that I did, and
You
so
weren't a nurse student. You were just in a completely different phase of your life.
yeah.
And
Well,
you, yeah,
I mean, I was not willing to surrender to a level in which I probably would have grown a lot, but there was something in me that knew there was something that I didn't trust too.
well, because it was actually self-abandonment, which is, I feel like, the thing that we discerned a lot through this relationship with John.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, you can add to this too. I'll just start it off by saying, like, so being around him, you could feel this power. You knew he was connected. You knew
Yep.
he spoke at times absolute truth. It felt like absolute transmission. I had somatic experiencing, like what Tracy was talking about with the light, like that
Undeniable.
undeniable for months and months and months and months on end. It was a connection to grace in addition to like having that quiet mind, understanding awareness, and being fully present for the first time. And just like it was both of those things. And like it was a path of truth. And you
Yes.
knew that it was true and it was right. Like you knew what he was saying, it was true. It was
Totally.
on a spiritual level. And, he had done so much inner work himself. I mean, my God, the man sat and did practice for 15, 16 hours a day. I mean,
Easy.
he was like, he was a hermit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He renounced a lot of human things that he could have been in his life. He could have been a father. He could have been out in the world working, but he didn't. He always chose progress over everything.
Yeah.
And so, but then it crossed a line, right? It crossed a line where he would then chastise you for just being a wife and a mother and
Yeah.
creating this guilt trip. And for me, he would be incredibly overprotective. I went and I lived with him and his partner, Elena, for 5 years, took care of him and treated my life like a modern monk. But I was in such a deep state of protectionism. And there it was coming from, and like what you were saying, like you had this through line, right? Of when you were a kid, like I think I should be this devoted. I think I should be like renounce all these things. And you had this idea of like, I am selfish for
Yep.
not just fully surrendering. And like that played out with John. And I feel like I didn't understand that until after the fact that I had a very similar path. It was like I had to be, but for me, I described it in this way of like being in this place of suffering. Like, oh, like we have to choose suffering and we have to choose to like renounce this ego. And it was this very old school way of looking at spirituality,
Yes.
quite honestly. It was an old paradigm of like you have to be that monk on the mountaintop in order to really attain what you need to attain. You have to be away from people. You can't like roll in the mud with people and expect to keep your energy high and clean. It was like that. And so it was
Yeah.
very separatist, and it was a lot of spiritual ego.
Right.
Actually, a lot of spiritual ego in it. Um,
Yeah. Which crosses some cult lines because,
oh,
this idea of
absolutely.
staying away from everyone except for me, is why I understand so many people who kind of get sucked into, because something is going right, something they feel
Exactly.
is
Just
true.
enough truth.
And yet this idea that you have to stay away or cut ties with your family, with your friends, with people you love because they're bad for you
Yeah,
is
not because you consciously choose to,
right.
even, but that it's just like just do away with it all.
Yep.
You Yeah.
That
Yeah,
anything less than that is just fear. It's
yeah,
just ego. It's just selfishness.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. hmm Yeah. And I mean, and you, the thing that I always admired, so Tracy always, had her home and had her husband and had her three kids. And it's
The
like
three-ring circus, you mean? Yeah.
you did. And I could always like I could leave the house in Ventura and then, we called it Cat Mountain. Right? We called it Cat
Yep.
Mountain. Because they took care of so many cats. And I could always gain perspective with you. And I always could see, no matter how entrenched I was and what it is that I was learning. And I realized later on, like I had to be there. Like I chose that 5 year
Yeah.
foray. I had a very karmic connection to John and what I had to learn there, on so many levels. But I would always get perspective from Tracy because you were still living your life. And I gave up acting, right? Like, because I was in
Yeah.
LA and I was an actress, and I gave it all up completely, and completely like fell off the map
Yeah. You did.
entirely. But you and I would get together, and not only would we like a part my personality, the creator in me, the playful person in me, the person that wasn't just trying to be this stoic bodhisattva, right? was like it would just come out immediately when you were
Yeah.
when
It
you
would be
were
like a little chipmunk peeking out, like, oh,
yeah,
is it safe? Am I
yeah.
cool? Can I?
Am I
Can
cool?
I? Right.
Yeah, and whenever we would get together, inevitably, and this still happens whenever Tracy and I get together, we always end up like in a pool of peaceful, beautiful grace just showers down on us when we're together, and it's just so incredible. It's total soul sister stuff, but we say it's like what? It's like when two or more gather in my name,
Yeah.
but I feel that way so deeply with you. It's again, it's so concrete, like totally undeniable. And we've had that every time we get together
Every
for
time.
12 years. It does not matter if I am stuck up at Cat Mountain or I am now like living my life, putting myself out there, having a completely different existence.
Yep.
Same for you.
Same for
You
me.
know, same.
Exact same.
And so that I think is the discernment is like you will keep coming back to this baseline experience with spirit, no matter what cuckoo stuff is trying to create resistance for you
Yeah.
or like is trying to keep you stuck somewhere, you will be guided out of it. You will keep seeing over and over and over again where you need to go.
Yep. Well, and sometimes dragging and kicking. Like
Yeah.
sometimes sometimes it does not feel like you're guided, and then I can look back and
Yeah.
see, oh wow, look at that beautiful thing that happened. That beautiful, do you swear on here? That beautiful shit sandwich that I
You
ate.
do, Tracy.
I don't know. Um, I'm like, and there's so many times I can see how something that felt like just such terrible misfortune was the perfect thing.
Yeah. By the way, John died last year. Last year or 2 years ago now?
A year and a half ago.
Year and a half ago. Okay. So also like something really shifted for you and I when John left the planet too.
Yeah, it really did.
Something really opened up and we got a lot of blessings and a lot of grace. And like you and I have talked about, like we both still have had experiences where we have felt John and he's come to us in different ways.
Totally.
Totally. Since he's left his body. Yeah. But I want to circle back to Judaism because you ended up being a producer on an incredible project and you ended up learning things about yourself. I really want you to share this about your past lives and your soul mission when it comes to understanding these different traditions. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think so, but a lot of times things will happen to me.
Well, Rabbi.
Oh, when I went to the rabbi?
Mm-hmm.
I had so many things happen with that show. I produced a Diary of Anne Frank with an all Latinx cast right when the previous administration enacted family separation, and I wasn't a particularly political person, and I don't know, but I couldn't get the thought of children being separated from their parents or parents not being able to get their kids back because they were trying to fight for a better life. I just was so moved to try to create something. And it was actually a very dangerous project because a lot of people didn't, they thought, we were saying ICE agents were Nazis or, I don't know.
I know people made too many like deep.
It was really, I mean, seriously, we got death threats. We were all over, it was bad. And then, and several of the cast members were Latin and Jewish. Families of Holocaust survivors, and like who has the right to tell this story, and also when we see seeds of things that are wrong, how do we stand up, whatever it might be, however your soul guides you to say we've got to handle this differently or find a way together to work together, was kind of the seeds of that show. But I was really, I had such a close connection to Judaism my whole life. And then when I lived in New York and I was acting, I lived with an Orthodox Jewish family. I kept kosher. I kept Shabbos. I took care of those kids and I learned so much, and I called them because I was really nervous about what they might think about me producing this show. And the mom was like, I think it's great.
Yeah.
In the middle of all the death threats and all the craziness, she sent me something from her mother-in-law who had survived the Holocaust to use in the show. Because she's like, I want you to know that you're following your own truth, and I think it's great. And so I saw a couple of rabbis. I had a rabbi bless the show. I'm trying to remember what did I tell you?
You were telling me about how it was about past lives, honestly, and it was about how how many souls died in the Jewish tradition and how those souls are trying to come back, but they can't all. Yeah.
That's right.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I was so moved when you told me, and I knew it to be true.
Yeah.
When you told me, I could feel it was like a full body knowing. So I don't know, like to me, that was a very specific example when you had a moment with spirit that you couldn't have made up.
It's funny. Do you have this experience where you have this thing and it happens and then you don't even hold it anymore?
Oh, completely.
I forgot about that. But it was a really, I have so many things like that happen.
I know you do. We could be here for 4 days, but
sometimes, you have these conversations with people and they're just,
out of nowhere. It's just
truth, truth talks just happen. But the truth is it's nothing to fear, and it's nothing that you even have to necessarily understand. No. There's just a knowing that sometimes our time isn't finished, or that there's more work to do. I mean, our teacher used to always say, like, hopefully this is his last round on this planet, but he felt like he needed to be here to teach, to help people, to probably also deal with some of his own personality stuff. Yeah. And the minute that he left his body, you and I both had this experience where he was free of those last remnants of things that were maybe destructive or maybe not healthy. It's not really for me to say, but all the stuff that, you know, Tracey didn't like or didn't think was correct or Tracey resented were just so gone.
Yeah.
He was free of all of that, and he could just be spirit. And I think of that even with that show or with the DNA we carry from our previous families or lives, that heaviness we're free of, or we will be. It just takes a little bit of patience.
The reason I brought into where I wanted to ask you about the rabbi talking to you and about how, you know, there were so many lives that passed in the Holocaust and that they were coming back here, but they all weren't coming back as Jewish.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they were here experiencing different traditions.
Yeah.
It still felt connected to Judaism.
Yeah, which could explain a lot about my path.
Yeah. And so again, it was just information in that moment, but it was like, I think that's kind of how spirit works too. And I'm experiencing it more too. It's like the more that you just keep opening yourself up to your own spiritual expansion and you just keep following your heart, it's like you just get these incredible moments of like information.
Yep.
And it just kind of like, again, it's just like you can put it there on your shelf. You're like, oh,
yes.
that's well, like that makes sense why I have been, you know, interested in this or this happened in my life. Like there's so much that happens, I feel like in hindsight as well.
Yeah. Where that you recognize it and you go, oh, huh. And then you file it away. It's
right.
It just informs your next moment.
Yeah.
And things just start to immediately, it's like the dust settles and things make more sense. But I don't know, the more I go, the more I don't need to know the details. It's just once you have the knowing about whatever circumstance, it's...
Yeah, because you and I were talking about that too, like, oh, like, you know, we've heard things about our past lives and our knowings, and it's like, great, you know, I've done Akashic record readings. And
Yeah.
Like, you know. Even my own intuition or like listening to a medium, like you made the perfect example of like, it's the elephant. Like you're just seeing a part of the elephant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
you don't have to sit here and like obsess about it or make assumptions about it or that being your only like information and like you ride, that's that information or ride or die and you have to make it your identity. Like it's just a piece of information.
Yeah.
It's just like,
I also had a feeling, I talked to John about this at one point, that I was at an ashram at one point too, in a different time or life. It was like something I felt like I'd experienced.
Yeah.
And John laughed and he's like, you do remind me of somebody who passed away really young, who, it's funny that you say that. Like you came back on the planet to also help me with something.
Mm.
And who knows, right? Who I was not very like, la-di-da about all past life, blah, blah, blah. But like, you know, it's kind of like learning your genetics when you do the swab in your mouth or whatever, and you go, oh,
great,
interesting.
Great. Yeah.
And then who cares if you're 5% Moroccan? You know, it's like it's information.
Right.
And I don't need to know too much about the nitty gritty of that. I just know that I have a knowing that this is not my first rodeo.
Right.
And that I'm really grateful to my supreme self for like trying to help me grow in this life, in this body, in this planet. Mm-hmm. I know, I have a knowing that something with larger understanding than me has helped me set myself up for that win in this life. You're looking at me like, yeah, you're wackadoodle. No.
No, not at all. I can't, I have nothing to add. It's like, yeah, I feel
Yeah.
you, Sister Mary Tracy. I'm
Oh,
just there
Sister
right there.
Ashley.
Ah, all right. So I have two other little topics I'd like to cover. So one, I feel like I really want to be really clear with people about like the discernment that we walked away from
Mm.
with our teacher, because I say so often that John was just one of those deeply polarizing people, and I had to so learn how to take the best and leave the rest.
Yes.
And really find out for myself what was truth. And it wasn't just like by blindly believing him, it was like continuing to practice on my own, and spirit guided me. And so then I could start branching out and making my own decisions. But what I feel like I went through in that experience, which was unhealthy in the sense of like not sustainable and not where you want to be, is I feel like both of our hearts really wanted to experience embodied sovereignty in this life.
Yeah.
And you and I both, in different ways, usurped our spiritual power to John.
Yes.
And it's not like right or wrong because he had plenty to teach us that we needed to know.
100%. And might be exactly the right path for somebody else.
Exactly.
Yes.
But that to stay in that space, it was not serving us. And like, and I feel like the real message when it comes to choosing a teacher out of this, and I would love for you to say yay, nay, or add to it, is that no one should tell you that you aren't your own agency to God or spirit or the divine. Like if anyone is saying that they have absolute knowing or that you don't have the absolute knowing, then that is not someone who is going to serve you in the long term.
Right. Well, and it's, I mean, have you ever heard the world is full of half enlightened masters?
Mm,
I mean, I don't necessarily think John was not almost fully enlightened, but I do think anytime somebody tells you that, it's a big red flag. And,
massive.
but remember, I grew up in the Catholic Church where the idea of original sin, where the idea of you need to be purified, your original self is no good.
Right.
And that's not everyone's interpretation, but
No.
I grew
But
up with very loving teachers and nuns who were wonderful, but that was still something I could not escape about the core teachings of my faith, that and they don't even believe this anymore, a lot of people, but that if you're not baptized before you die, you're going to hell.
right.
A sparkly new baby, because your soul is wrong path.
Yeah,
It
your
needs,
humanness is a sin in and of itself.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
that wasn't something that I necessarily questioned. That was something that in our teacher's point of view was similar to my upbringing.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
it was very, yeah,
there was
you're
a
right.
part of me that needed to cut the head off of whatever it was that didn't want to surrender.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't sure that what was bristling about that or didn't want that wasn't just ego. I couldn't see the difference between the ego that was also bristling and then this supreme self who needed to trust and listen inside and use all of those things I was learning, but also find my own path up the mountain. And
Right.
now I get it, but then
Mhm.
I didn't know what in me just could not go that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we have continued to connect on is that path of self-trust, of sovereignty, of realizing that there really is not one way, that we do not have to suffer, that we can honor our human desires, like all
Yeah.
of these things.
Well, and listen to them. And ultimately, you can reject them or accept them or follow
Right.
that way or not. But like, notice. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you remember, there was a time when you were really in it. You came to my house and you were really in it. And you just said, I'm just trying to make myself as small as possible.
Yeah, that was
And
towards the end of the
it just
time.
about broke my heart.
Yep.
I was like, no, this is a wild, wonderful life, and you have to live it fully.
Yeah.
And no more making yourself small. Whatever that is or whatever that looks like, that cannot be the right way.
Right.
It cannot be.
Right. And it wasn't coming from a place of ego either.
No.
Making the self small was a total self-protection and mechanism.
Yeah. And a way to like think you're cutting the heads off of whatever is running you, but it's not. It's also trying to quiet the small voice that knows of knowing, that knows the next right thing.
Yeah.
I remember being like, you have to walk away.
Yeah.
You said that, and it was like, oh, I'm not a friend if I don't tell you it's time.
Right. Right. No, it's so true. And I wanted to foray a little bit into spirit experiences through motherhood, because one frame, and we'll start from this experience. You were like, if you were my daughter, Ashley, like I would tell you this, because it's really easy to understand our heavenly mother, father.
Yes.
When we put it in the frame of like, how would we want our children to live?
Right.
And you just put it very squarely for me. You have 3 children. I didn't have any children at the time. And it made perfect sense at the time. And so, yeah, you and I talked about that too, how motherhood has also been, I mean, it's like, such a spiritual experience on so many levels, but if there's anything
an ass kicker too.
Yeah, it is an ass kicker.
Woo!
But if there's anything specific about motherhood you'd like to say, I'm just giving you the open mic right here.
I think for me, it was a real learning that my children are not my children. They are my privilege to get to try to usher into adulthood and learn from and try to grow with. And they do not belong to me. They belong to the divine. They are not my children. They are of me. And what an amazing way to work on yourself with children, because the ego, the stuff, the attachments, nobody pushes your buttons like your children. Just wait till they're teenagers. Just all of it. It's the pride and ego, the personal, it's an amazing, amazing way. Relationships, if they're healthy, an amazing way to work on yourself. All of it is a way to grow. Right relationship, right work, all of it. But motherhood is special. It's a special thing because it's a real deep surrender. And also a trust in your knowing that sometimes you know it's the best thing, even if no one else can see it. Yeah. And you, as a mother, there's no trepidation about when you know something is not good,
right,
for your children, or right, or that when you need to protect them, you're not worried about, is that your ego or is that whatever. There's just a knowing.
There is just a knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. Thank you for that. No, I love that. And I feel like that perspective, the first thing that you just shared, that your children are of you, they don't belong to you, I feel like is basically the foundation of any sort of cycle breaking you're going to do.
Yeah.
In this life for your children. It's like you have to see things very squarely, like, nope, like they're not meant to be copies of you. No, they're not meant to be projections or glorifications of you either. Yeah.
Nope.
That stops all of that shit in its tracks.
Mm-hmm. And they will be free in a way that you really are breaking a cycle. Every time you start to cling or you start to react or you start to... No room at that end. No room.
Yes. For me, a lot of it was even comparison to how my own mother parents. And I was like finding like, oh, like I am I'm not doing things the way that she does them. Does that like, am I failing my children? And it's like,
Huh?
oh, no, I don't parent that way. Those aren't my priorities. Those are her priorities. You
Right.
know, it's like, and having even just to discern that for me, that was a big one too.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, from the beginning, for sure.
Wow.
Oh, it's Trace. Oh, Trace face.
Oh, Ash.
I feel like we can kind of wrap it up. We're just at over an
Yeah.
hour right now, but
Yeah, we're just blah, blah, blabbing along. But you know what? I just love you. My heart is so
I
happy
love you
seeing
so
you,
much.
talking to you.
I know. I just could stare. I could I could stare at Tracy the way that I stare at a baby. Like I just
I love you. I love you with my whole heart so intensely.
Me too.
And not just because we have experienced things together,
No.
or it's like you're somebody I've known beyond my understanding. I just love you.
Yeah, I just love you so much. It's like going for the walk in the woods. Like every time I get on the phone, it's like, oh, let's just sit down and take this in. Let's just feel this. It's so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's truly divine. It's truly divine. So that's soul family, people. That's soul family. There is no efforting. It just is.
Mm-hmm.
It just is.
Just is.
Yeah. So if you had to describe what spirit is, what would that sound like and look like and feel like?
Light, peace, love, quiet, compassion. Oh, the ocean, waves of the ocean, warm, kindness,